On the morning of my 85th birthday, I got a nursing home as a present. My children showed up at my door and asked me to get dressed in my Sunday best. I honestly believed it was a surprise, maybe a nice resort or a fancy brunch at the country club. But when the Lincoln stopped, I saw we were at a senior care facility. That was my gift. That was what they gave me in exchange for 50 years of raising them, giving them love, giving them everything. That's what I got back. They sold my house and threw me in there like I was an old broken piece of furniture. If you have a son or daughter, you need to listen to me closely, because the way they left me there and what I did afterwards, well, let's just say they never saw it coming. I wasn't always this fragile old lady you see sitting here. Oh, no, I came from money, real money. I was born right here in the Midwest, the only daughter of a man who owned half the county cattle, cornfields, commercial real estate. I grew up in a house with white pillars out front, never knowing what it meant to want for a single thing. My husband, Henry, he wasn't rich, not a dime to his name when I met him. He was one of my father's employees, a foreman, rough hands, dirt under his fingernails, but a heart of gold. We fell in love, and despite the whispers in town, we built a life. When my father passed, I inherited everything, the land, the buildings, the fortune. But I wasn't a businesswoman. I was raised to be a mother, a wife, so Henry took over. He managed the empire. He grew it. He turned my inheritance into a legacy. He worked himself to the bone to honor my father's name. We had 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, and looking back, I think that's where we went wrong. We gave them the life of royalty, private schools, convertibles at 16, summers in Europe. They never learned the value of a dollar because they never had to earn one. Then it happened. Henry was 72, still strong as an ox, or so I thought. He was at his desk in the study, looking over the harvest reports. I went in to bring him his coffee, and he was just gone. Massive heart attack. When he died, a part of me died with him. That big house, oh Lord, became a tomb. The silence was so loud it hurt my ears, and that's when things started to change, slowly at first. My children stepped in to manage the estate. Don't worry, Mom. They'd say, go rest, we've got this. But they didn't have Henry's grit. They only had his checkbook. They started fighting over control immediately. Who got the corner office? Who got the biggest bonus? They played business people, wearing expensive suits. But they were just children playing dress up with my money. I started seeing the signs, the Sunday lunches. They used to be sacred. The house would be full of noise, grandkids running around, the smell of roast beef. But after Henry died, the excuses started. Can't make it this week, Mom. Big meeting. We're going to the Hamptons this weekend, Mom. Too busy. Months would go by without a visit. I'd sit at that long dining table all by myself, staring at the empty chairs. I'd call them just to hear a voice, and they'd rush me off the phone. I've got to go, Mom. They were selling off parcels of land my father had bought 60 years ago. Market adjustments, they called it. They were stripping the estate to feed their own greed. Then came the morning of my 85th. I woke up with a flutter in my chest. I thought, this is it, 85, they have to make time for me today. I spent hours getting ready. I curled my hair. I put on my favorite dress, the navy blue silk, one Henry always loved. I even baked a coffee cake, just in case they came in hungry. I sat by the window in the living room, watching the long driveway, just waiting. When their cars pulled up, my heart just soared. All of them, my sons, my daughter, the grandkids. They walked in, but nobody sat down. Nobody hugged me. Nobody even looked at the cake. The air in the room was freezing cold. They were all checking their phones, texting, looking at their watches like they had somewhere better to be. My oldest son, Matt, didn't even say happy birthday. He just said, Mom, grab your coat and pack a small overnight bag. Just the essentials. We're taking you somewhere special. I smiled like a fool. I thought, oh, bless their hearts, a surprise party, a weekend getaway. I went to my room and packed my bag, humming a tune, thinking they finally appreciated me. I got in the back of Matt's SUV. We drove for 40 minutes. I tried to talk. I asked about the grandkids' school, about the business. They gave me one-word answers. Fine, good, okay. My daughter wouldn't even turn her head to look at me. Then we pulled into a driveway. I looked out the window expecting a hotel or a restaurant. Instead, I saw a sign, Shady Grove Assisted Living and Memory Care. My stomach dropped to the floor. I felt sick. I looked at Matt. What is this, son? He didn't even turn around from the driver's seat. He just said, "It's for the best, Mom. The estate is gone." Gone? I whispered. "We sold the main house this morning," he said, his voice flat, emotionless. "We needed the cash to cover the business debts. You can't live there alone anyway. You'll be happy here. You'll have supervision. Supervision like I was a child, like I was a criminal." They walked me to the front desk like they were dropping off a package at UPS. They rushed me through signing the admission papers. They handed over my bag to a nurse, and then they left. On my 85th birthday, they didn't stay for lunch. They didn't hug me. They didn't even say, "We love you." They just walked out to their luxury cars, bought with my money, and drove off. I stood there in the hallway, leaning on my cane, watching the automatic doors close, feeling like my heart had been ripped right out of my chest. I wasn't a mother anymore. I was an expense they had finally cut. Life in the home was gray. It smelled of antiseptic and boiled vegetables. But the weekends were torture. I'd sit in the common room and watch other residents getting visitors, flowers, balloons, great. Grandkids running down the halls. I sat in the corner, staring at the wall, trying not to cry. Mother's Day came and went. Not a card, not a phone call, nothing. I realized then I was truly alone. That's when I met Anthony. He wasn't family. He wasn't a doctor. He was a volunteer, a young guy, maybe 30, working 2 jobs, just trying to get by. He saw me crying in the courtyard one afternoon. It was the 4th of July, and everyone else was with family. He sat down on the bench next to me. "You doing okay, ma'am?" he asked gently. He started visiting me every Tuesday and Thursday. He didn't want anything from me. He brought me real coffee, not that instant sludge they served in the cafeteria. He brought his wife, Sarah. They listened to my stories about my father, about the farm, about how things used to be. They treated me like a human being, not a burden. One day they brought their little boy, Leo. Oh, Leo was just the sweetest thing you ever saw. But I noticed right off the bat the poor lamb couldn't walk right. He had this trouble with his little feet, something he'd been born with that just kept him from getting around like the other kids. He was stumbling, clutching onto his daddy's leg just to stay upright, and you could see the wincing in his eyes from the pain of it. I asked Anthony, "Honey, what's going on with that baby's feet?" Anthony's face just fell. He looked at his wife, then back at me, and I saw the tears starting to well up. "It's a condition in his lower legs and feet, ma'am," he said, his voice all thick. "It's real severe. There's a specialist surgeon over in St. Louis who says he could fix it, make it so the boy could walk and run just like anyone else. But our insurance, they went and denied claim, said it wasn't medically necessary yet. The surgery and the rehab, it's $50,000. We don't have that kind of money, no matter how many double shifts I pull." I looked at that little boy, and then I thought about my own children, my own flesh and blood driving their Mercedes and taking vacations in Aspen, paid for by selling the roof over my head. They had millions, and they wouldn't spare a dime for their own mother, let alone a stranger, and something inside me snapped, but in a good way. A clarity washed over me. You see, my children were greedy, but they were lazy. They thought they knew everything about my father's estate. They sold the land, the stocks, the house, but they didn't know about the old grain silo on the far edge of the property, the one that looked like it was about to fall down. My father lived through the Great Depression. He didn't trust banks with his real safety net. He kept what he called ghost assets, things that weren't on any bank statement or deed. To my kids, that silo was just a pile of junk covered in vines, but to me, it was my father's final promise. And they certainly didn't know about the false floor under the old tractor parts. I grabbed Anthony's hand. I squeezed it hard. I said, "Listen to me closely, son. I need you to do me a favor." I reached inside my blouse and pulled out a tarnished brass key on a chain that I never took off. I asked for a piece of paper and drew a map with shaking hands. "Go there tonight," I whispered. The property was sold to a developer, but nobody goes near that old silo. It's too dangerous, but the floor is solid. He looked terrified. "Ma'am, what is this?" "It's justice," I said, "and it's a future for that boy. He went. He hesitated, but he went." Inside that hidden compartment, covered in 60 years of dust and straw, was a heavy metal box. It was filled with antique gold coins and rare jewelry my mother had hidden during the war. A small fortune in solid gold that never made it onto any inventory list. My ungrateful children never knew it existed because they never cared enough to ask about family history. I told Anthony, "Sell it, pay for that surgery, fix your boy's legs, and keep the rest for your family." He cried. He tried to give it back. He said it was too much, that it belonged to my heirs. I looked him in the eye and said, "My heirs threw me away like garbage. If you don't take it, it will rot in the ground. Please let me do one good thing with what's left of my life." He did it. 6 months later, I was sitting in the nursing home garden, staring at the gate, when I saw a car pull up. It wasn't a luxury car, it was a minivan. Anthony stepped out, then Sarah, and then running towards me, running just as smooth and steady as any other child, was little Leo. "Grandma," he shouted, "look at me, Grandma. I can run now. Grandma, my own grandkids hadn't called me that in 5 years. They probably forgot I was alive, but that wasn't the end." Anthony and Sarah had used the rest of the money to buy a beautiful ranch house just outside of town, and they had built a guest suite specifically for me. Anthony kneeled down beside my chair, holding my hand. "Pack your things, Angela," he said. "We're taking you home for real this time." I checked out of that facility that same afternoon. When my own children found out, well, you should have seen the fireworks. They went absolutely ballistic. Someone in town saw me living in a nice house with a new family. They did some digging. They found out about the surgery, the gold, the stolen inheritance. They came banging on Anthony's door. They hired expensive attorneys. They tried to sue Anthony for elder abuse and theft. They claimed I was incompetent, that he had manipulated a senile old woman. They screamed in the courtroom that the gold was part of the family estate. We ended up in front of a judge. I sat there completely calm. My lawyer rolled me up to the stand. The judge looked at me and asked, "Mrs. Angela, did you give this fortune away of your own free will?" I looked at my sons. I looked at my daughter. They looked desperate, sweaty, greedy. They looked at me like I was a broken ATM. I cleared my throat and spoke into the microphone. "Clear as throat, Your Honor. My children sold my roof out from under me on my 85th birthday. They discarded me like an old coat they didn't want anymore. This money, it wasn't part of any bank account or inheritance they had a claim to. It was mine, held in private for decades, and I chose to give it to the only man who treated me like a human being instead of an invoice to be paid. Anthony gave me a family. I gave him a future. My mind is clear, but my children's hearts are not." The courtroom went silent. You could hear a pin drop. The judge looked at my children with pure disgust. He dismissed the case immediately. Since the gold was never recorded in my husband's estate, never listed in the will, and I was proven to be of sound mind, it was mine to give. They got nothing, not a red cent. They had squandered the millions they stole from me, and they lost the millions I hid from them. Today I'm 87. I live in the guest suite. I smell fresh pancakes in Anthony's kitchen every morning. I watch Leo play soccer in the yard. I am loved, and my kids, they're broke. They lost the business. I haven't spoken to them since the trial, and honestly, I sleep like a baby, so here is my lesson to you. A lesson it took me 85 years to learn. We spend our lives thinking we owe our children everything. We think blood is thicker than water. We think that just because we gave birth to them, they will care for us when we are old. But let me tell you, sometimes water is what saves you when you're dying of thirst. Don't hand over your life to your kids assuming they have character just because you raised them. Character isn't inherited. It's a choice. Keep something for yourself. Protect yourself. Don't sign over the deed until you are ready. Because sometimes the person who holds your hand at the very end isn't the one whose diapers you changed. It isn't the one you sent to college. It's the stranger who saw you crying on a bench and decided to stop and ask, "Are you okay?" Well, sighs, I guess that's about it. That's my story. It wasn't easy to say out loud, but I felt like I needed to share it. If you think this might help someone else, maybe a friend or a parent who's getting up there in years, please pass it along. Share it. Sometimes people just need to hear the truth to guard themselves so they don't end up in a situation like mine. I was lucky, wasn't I? I had that old metal box hidden away that my children were too arrogant to look for. Not everyone has that kind of safety net. Anyway, thank you, truly. Thank you so much for listening to an old lady ramble on. Now, I'd love to know, how old are you and where are you listening from? Do let me know below. I'd love to see just how far my story has traveled. All right, everyone, until next time.